How did the perception of AI change since the last year? Are authors using it more or less? Do readers even care if AI was used or not? Let's see how the opinions have changed since 2025. Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Last year I did a survey around AI use because I wanted to know if AI can be used to write a book. I asked a bunch of authors and readers about their opinion, what they think AI can realistically do if they would use AI. If you're interested in this video, I highly recommend to check it out before you watch this one. If you haven't yet, link is down in the description. And then once you watch the 2025 version, come back to see how the opinions have changed in the last year. Because this year I put out a survey again and I asked my author and reader friends what they think about AI. And on top of that, I wanted to look a little bit deeper into should it even be used to write a book? What might be the pros and cons about it? And what impact does it have? I had 67 authors and readers join me for that survey, so thank you so much for your support and helping me make this video. And just as a side note, the video is a bit more survey research based than opinion based, even though my opinion will slip in every now and then, I'm sure of that. All right, let's start with the author survey. Like last year, I had a specific set of questions for authors and a specific set of questions for readers, and I want to start with the author survey. Some of the questions are the same that I had last year. Some of the questions I changed a little bit, and then I added a couple of new questions, so let's talk about those. Starting with, which of these do you consider acceptable use of AI? And this was a multiple choice question. Similar to last year, I had a couple of topics that fall more into the assisted with AI category. I had some selections that fall more into the written with AI category. If you want to know the difference of that, I explained that a little bit in the 2025 video. I'm not repeating that again because you can go back and watch that video if you want to. Although this year I reduced the amount of choices a little bit. I lumped them a little bit together because it was a bit too much. So on the more assisted of AI side, we had categories like research, brainstorming, fact checking, then grammar, thesaurus, spell checking, then developmental help like world building, outlining the story, etc. for feedback or as a beta reader. And then more on the writing side, the option are rewrite parts of a sentence or paragraphs or write entire paragraphs or chapters on this own. Of course, there's a none of this option, and then there's an other option. This year, similar to last year, the biggest chunk of selections fell into the grammar, thesaurus, spell checking area. But then a big change to last year is the none of this option. That grew like crazy. Last year, we had about 8% of people who said none of this is an option. This year, it's 24% of people that say none of these selections are acceptable when it comes to writing a book. The other category this year included things like dictation or compiling data, chart creation, coding your website, that kind of stuff. As a side note, a lot of responses mentioned that while research, brainstorming, etc. is an okay use for AI, it's very important to fact check whatever it spits out. The next question was, have you ever toyed with the idea of completely writing a book with AI, with the focus being like actually writing sentences, paragraphs, chapters, not just like grammar check, etc. And I think this is where we see a big change to last year, because last year we had a few, I'm experimenting with, or I started writing or I completed writing. This year, there's no experimenting anymore. It's a yes or a no. There was no in between at all. And on the no side, we see that it grew from 79% to 88%. And on the I started writing or completed a book, we went down from 13 to 11%. And then I added a new question, and we will get more into that topic throughout the video as well. And that new question is, if you've used AI for writing, are you adding a disclosure about your use of AI in your book? And there are some interesting things that happened with this question. So first of all, one interesting part is that most of the yeses are from authors who said they did not use AI to write a book or are not even thinking about using AI to write a book. One even added a comment around, I added a disclosure, but saying that I didn't use any AI AI to write this book. Out of the authors who said they started or completed a book written with AI, the majority said they would not label it accordingly. And even more, those who wrote the book with AI, half of them lost sales because of it, labeled or not labeled. And that was actually my next question. Have you lost readers, sales, or support because people believed rightly or wrongly that you used AI? And that is also a new question this year. We have a relatively low yes answer rate, only 6%, but 45% are unsure about it or they don't know about it, but they definitely worry about it. And then 45% said no. And then we have a couple of others here. So in 2025, I had a question that was more around, are you worried about your livelihood? Because AI is now in the picture, where 43.2% said yes and 56.8% said no. In hindsight, I should have kept that question in. I would have loved to hear how that changed in particular according this year. But again, hindsight. But yeah, I shifted that question a little bit more from general livelihood to specifically, are you worried about losing sales because people throw these AI accusations out left and right? But the whole topic around losing sales, losing revenue is a legitimate fear that I'm seeing online or have been seeing in the last year, and I will definitely cover that a little bit more later in the video. All right, my next question was one that I also asked last year, and that was, do you think AI will eventually replace human authors? What I found interesting here is that more people than last year said no, I don't think that will actually happen. So a lot more people are less worried about AI replacing them in any shape or form. And I also asked the question, what's your reasoning for answering the way you did? And a lot of people said, well, it's because of authenticity and human experience. AI is not creative. AI is too obvious. The human still needs to be in the loop. AI is more an amplifier. And in general, I enjoy writing. Why would I want AI take that away from me? I want to pause here real quick though, because I kind of want to talk about a thought that is in my head. Nothing right or wrong, but something that I'm thinking about. And that is, like some of these comments for those last questions where human experience is a big thing that makes an author an author, and that is something that AI cannot leverage, or just the author themselves are what makes a book worth reading, like their experience, their passion, their creativity. So I have a question for you. We're in a very unique space and in a very fortunate space where we know a lot of the authors whose books we read, right? Like back here, there are a lot of books where I know the author personally. I've talked with them, I've done interviews with them. I just chat with them. We become friends over the years. Not every reader is in that situation, right? Not every reader knows the authors or even wants to know the author. They just want to consume the book. They want to consume the story and are good with that. Like as an example, my mother, she's not active anywhere on social media or anything. She finds her books in bookstores by browsing through Amazon and that kind of stuff. And I don't think she even knows that AI is a thing when it comes to writing books. So what is about those people? What is important for them? Quality of the book, I assume, like how well it is written. Kind of a rhetorical question. I don't know if there's an answer to that, but it's something that is going through my mind as I read the answers around, author's experience and humanity and all that kind of stuff. All right, and last question that I put out there, because I always want to give like an open field for letting me know anything else they want to talk about, is there anything else you'd like to add? Like last year, a lot of comments around theft and that AI shouldn't do the creative stuff, but the stuff that needs to be done so I have time for the creative stuff. So in that sense, very similar than last year. And then on the no AI side at all, the arguments are a lot around writing is the fun part. Why would I give that away? The writing is what it makes it worthwhile, with one of the comments being, we have this mindset in the States that you can do anything you want, be anything you want, except you can't. You can want to be a writer, but you may have absolutely no talent for it. Still, we think I could write a better story. And now AI is right there like a pusher saying, yes, yes, of course, you are the most creative human being on the planet. Then on the kind of medium AI side, which is rare, but there is kind of a middle way for some of the people. They say, well, you can't really avoid AI. It's very prevalent in all of our lives. With a comment being, I have used AI in a backwards way to ask for ideas with the intention of assuming those ideas are predictable predictable and therefore I avoid them. And then comments on the pro AI side saying that it enables creators who otherwise wouldn't be able to write, with one of the comments saying people aren't forced to use AI and another person's circumstance or choice does not take away your own decisions or achievements in overcoming a disadvantage. One comment was a more productive conversation would be around if you choose to use it, how does it help? So let's have that conversation. Why would someone use AI to write? And even though my survey, and at least in my echo chamber that I'm in on Instagram or YouTube, the overarching sentiment is like no AI at all, there are people out there who use AI to write. There are published books out there where AI had a heavy influence in there. So I wanted to look at what is the reason for an author to say, I want to use AI in my daily writing process. Since I had a very low amount of authors who used AI to write a book in my survey, I went out and scoured the internet for some more insights on that. And one of the reasons is probably money, a capitalistic argument saying I can produce more books with AI so I can make more money. And there's one author that came out in a New York Times article, you might have read it, Carol Hart. She made 6 figures publishing like over 200 romance books last year or within a year or something across 21 pen names, and she sold roughly like 50,000 copies of her books. So I read the article, and then she did an AMA and Ask Me Anything on Reddit, where she was live there while people were asking questions and she was answering them. And I read the whole thing. One thing that became very clear is that she doesn't care about the reader or about the writing experience. For her, it's really a means to an end. She just wants to have revenue. That's all it is about. And the other thing that became very clear is she was then starting to advertise her own AI engine that she created for writing all of these books. And now she is starting to sell this AI engine. So this whole thing that she did with the New York Times article and the AMA on Reddit felt very much like an advertisement for her AI engine and less for her books. So she was the more extreme example that I've seen last year, but there were others out there that said, I wrote books the usual way before, and now I'm using AI. I actually trained AI on my voice with my own books, so now it's just producing things faster. And to be fair, there, even before AI, was a known pattern of certain authors that don't care necessarily about the writing or the reader. They care about writing books and pushing them out as fast as possible because it makes money. There are a number of names that I can think of out of the top of my head. Not saying that they used AI, but that they have a very specific pattern in their books, and every book sounds very similar to another, and they write a book every year, publish a book every year, and they have thousands of readers, and it's working for them. So money is a very legitimate reason for doing anything, really. But I also found less capitalistic reasons across the various AI writers, things like writing help, providing feedback. So instead of asking your friend to go through the 3rd revision of chapter 8 for the next 4 hours, you work with Claude or whatever AI tool instead. It helps with introducing randomness in the creative process and just help spark creativity, spark ideas, that kind of stuff. To overcome ADHD, that was a very big argument, and I tried to read a little bit more about that, but I didn't find too much information. But essentially people saying, listen, I have all these ideas in my head, I have all these worlds and character names and all that stuff in my head. I just have this challenge of putting thought to paper, and I want to do that, and AI helps me with that. It's still my idea, it just helps me structure my thoughts, put it into like a usable outline, and takes away that blank page. All right, enough about authors. Now let's go on to the reader side and look at the reader survey results last year versus this year, starting with the first question: would you read a book that you knew was written by AI? I don't know if it's really a surprise, but the no side definitely grew. Last year, we had about 23% that said, yes, I would read a book I knew was written by AI versus 76% that said no. This year, we had 15% yes and 84% no. So there's definitely a growth in readers and reviewers that don't want to deal with AI written books. Next question I asked last year, same categories that I had the authors go through. And as you can see, similar to authors, AI assisted things like grammar, thesaurus, spell checking are pretty high up there, and people are absolutely fine with authors using those. What I find interesting is that the answer, none of these, like last year, for readers is a lot lower than it is for authors. So readers are a lot more forgiving with authors using AI in one way or another than authors are themselves. While it did increase to last year, so last year we were at 1%, this year we are at 10%, so it did increase quite a bit. It is still a lot lower than the 24% on the author side. Next question was, should AI written books be clearly labeled as such? And this year's answers changed as well, but towards the less yes answer. Last year we had 95% that said yes, they should be clearly labeled. This year we have only 90% that do that. And then I asked what the reasoning is for selecting that answer, and it was pretty split between transparency, readers deserve to know what they're spending their money on, and then the other side is no, labeling only invites harassment. And what I thought was interesting is that those readers that said they would read a book written with AI also said it shouldn't be labeled because it only invites harassment. All right, next question that I also asked last year was, imagine you write a book, loved it, you gave it 5 stars, you put out a review, and then you learn that it was completely written by AI. What would you do? Last year was a pretty good share, like a third across the different answers, with nothing versus I would change it somehow versus I would delete the review. This year it changed a little bit more towards the editing it in some way or another. So we have less people that would do nothing. We have less people that would delete the review, and more people that would at least add a disclaimer or update it in some way or another, their rating and the review itself. With my next question, I wanted to know what should happen if a reader accuses an author of secretly using AI, but the author denies it. And the answers were kind of split. People generally don't know how to handle that situation. While the majority said give the author the benefit of the doubt, there were still people who said, I really don't know how to deal with this. Like, I don't know what we are supposed to do with that. And even people saying the burden is on the author or the publisher to prove that they did not use AI. And by the way, this is no matter if it's true. I'm not talking about very obvious cases where a prompt was left into the book. We've seen that a couple of times throughout the year. But also I'm talking about accusations where it is based on like, oh, you used 5 em dashes. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that kind of stuff where there's not an actual proof in the book that there was AI in play at all. Next question was specifically for my reviewer friends. Like last year, I wanted to know if they have a policy around reviewing books that were written with AI. Not really surprising given how the survey went so far. The yes, I do and I accept books written with AI is a lot lower than last year. But interestingly enough, the yes, I do and I do not accept books with AI is lower as well. And the no, I don't have a review policy for books written with AI is a lot higher. So that is an interesting change year over year. And then also, similar to authors, similar to last year, I gave readers an open-ended text where they could let me know anything else that they wanted to cover. And the overall sentiment actually seems to be more that it has gotten kind of annoying, but that they don't think AI will replace human authors anytime soon. With one of the comments saying, am I worried Stephen King will be replaced by the T-2000? No. Do I think unscrupulous humans will use a tool to line their pockets? Yes. Or comments like, it could be an absolute boon to society, but instead we get the utterly predictable and depressing turbo capitalist 5000 implementation. And then with one of the comments, I felt a little bit called out, saying people can't even write basic emails anymore because AI will do it for them. Yes, I do use AI to go over my emails that I send to my customers, especially if it is a bit spicy, but you know what? It works. Other than the overall change from 2025 to 2026 on how authors and readers perceive the use of AI, one of the topics that I really wanted to get into this year is if we in general are more vocal about the use of AI. Not like an Instagram post that says, hey, I'm against AI, but these witch hunts basically. Because that is something that I flagged as concerning last year. And I even said something around, imagine a situation where an author now has to prove that they didn't use AI. Well, this is not an imagining anymore because it happened multiple times since the last year. And there are a lot of comments across the AI spectrum on that topic. So in my survey, right, I already talked about people saying it's on the author or the publisher to prove that there was no AI in play. But even outside of my survey, just in general online, I'm seeing comments like, I get so fatigued when I'm reading something and suddenly certain line deliveries scream AI to me. Nowadays, I will just name and shame unless proven otherwise. So you see a lot more of that stuff. but then even comments like, suspicion is everywhere these days, the witch hunt fucking sucks, and I don't even want to write anymore. All I know that those little things bother me way more today than they did on a pre-AI world. And that, my friends, that is something annoyingly enough I caught myself doing, where I read something and I was like, that sounds kind of NI, and the moment I thought it, was like, I hate that this is happening. I hate that this is a thought that is coming into my reading experience now and is destroying my reading experience really because of that. In a different conversation online, I found one comment that I wanted to share as well, saying we've pushed authors into this insane position where they're supposed to be an entire marketing team, supposed to creating collateral, supposed to have illustrations and whatever else for absolutely insane social media demands. The cheap options are already flooded with AI, so where exactly are they supposed to source these things? I'm just finding it increasingly difficult to condemn independent authors for trying to succeed in a system rigged against them that demands the sort of resources only corporate giants have. The problem is that all of these accusations are based on arguments that people can detect AI. Again, another comment that I found online is, I feel like when people don't have the ability to or can't articulate why they didn't like a book, they immediately jump to AI accusations instead of just saying, I don't know, the vibes were off. No one, and I said that last year too, no one can with 100% guarantee identify AI written text, even if they say they can. Yes, I can spot an AI written LinkedIn post from a mile away, but then at the same time, I just read a book that was from 1990 something, and I could have sworn that the AI was used to write this book because it had all the telltale signs of what Claude usually spits out as text. Obviously, that's not the case because the book was written way before AI even was a thing. Last year, I shared an experiment famous fantasy author Mark Lawrence did. This year, I found a study from Cambridge University called Bot or Not? Can People Tell the Difference Between Stories Written by a Human or by an AI System?, which was published in August 2026. They asked 1,682 adults to read one of 6 short stories. 3 of these short stories were written with ChatGPT, I believe, and 3 were written by humans. And across the board, the AI-generated short story was rated as more absorbing and of higher quality than those who read a story written by a human. By the way, I will link all the studies that I'm talking about down below in the description so you can read it in its entirety by yourself if you're interested in that. But that same Cambridge study did a second experiment where the adult had to read 2 stories. One was written with AI, one as a human, and they had to answer the question which one of those they thought was human written, and only about 40% guessed correctly. Only 40%, just saying. All right, now we could talk about detection tools because there are hundreds of those out there. And of course, I talked about that last year as well. I shared some examples. This year's example that I'm going to share is this AI detection tool that flagged Frankenstein by Mary Shelley as 100% AI generated. What I think is scary is that these AI detection tools are using AI to detect AI. And one of the things that I didn't find a lot of information on is what are the criteria these AI detection tools use to identify something as written with AI or heavily influenced by AI or whatever the answer is or not. Maybe someone of you can point me into the right direction of a study. I couldn't find anything. I would love to learn more about it because I find it scary to a certain extent that tools that no one really understands how they function say something about a written work where we don't know if it's true or not. All right, moving from the witch hunt to more a biased view towards AI, there are bigger studies out there that looked at what does it mean to someone if we say this was generated by AI, in particular to written text. And there's something called the artificial intelligence disclosure penalty. So there was an experiment where thousands of people were asked to evaluate creative writing. And then afterwards they were told, hey, this was written with AI, no matter if it was or not. And there's a decreased evaluation by 6.2% on average based on that study. And one of the authors of this study said, we even tested award-winning human written story labeled as AI and found the same penalty. So basically meaning going out nilly-willy and saying this is AI, true or not, actually harms the author. And then that Cambridge study from earlier, the bot or not one, also looked into, okay, what effect does it have if we tell you this is AI generated? Again, no matter if the story was actually human written or written by an AI. So I'm showing you the same picture again. The blue one is the rating after they learned this was written with AI. So they rated lower on average. The other big question that I had last year is, what is the impact on AI on an author's revenue? Not due to false accusation and then lost sales, but in general. Because one of the authors in last year's survey talked about that Amazon already put in a measure where authors can upload less books. Like there's a barrier to like, this is the amount of books you can upload on a daily or weekly basis. So Amazon has already last year and before then prepared its platform to reduce the amount of AI books that can be published through the platform. And I also asked in the survey, like, are you worried about your livelihood as an author because AI is now there and could write books a lot faster? And reminder, 43.2% said yes, 56.8% said no. So there was a big chunk of authors who were worried about it. So this year, I did find a study. Last year, those numbers weren't available, but this year I actually found a study called Generative AI Floods and Dilutes the Market for Books. The study was published in August 2026, so brand spanking new. Focus is the US. I assume it doesn't clearly call it out, but it's talking US dollars, revenue numbers. It's mentioning the big 5 publishers. The authors are from US universities, so my assumption is the number is on the US. And again, I will put this study down below in the description box because I find it incredibly fascinating. That might be just me, I don't know. But in this study, they analyzed 14,419 self-published books, all that had a rank of 1.5 million or higher, aka they made sure these books actually had sales associated with them. They looked at sales between Q1 first quarter 2023 and Q1 2026, and they got the proprietary data from one of those big 5 publishers. Total side note, one number that the study also throws out is that in 2025, there were 4.17 million ISBN registered titles. 4.17 million. I know we are publishing a lot of books every year, but 4.17 million, that is crazy. And 3.5 million of those were self-pub titles. That is crazy. I find that. Anyway, total side note. So in this study, those 14,000 books, they used a software called Pangram to analyze if these books had a substantial AI use in them. If they did, they ranked them at 25% or higher. Light AI use was ranked between 0 and 25%, and then no AI use, obviously 0%. As a side note, and again, read the study for all the details, they acquired these books legally by either asking the author or from the library, that kind of stuff. And I know I talked earlier in the video about softwares like Pangram likely not being accurate, and how do they even work, right? What are the rating criteria? But even if you take into account that this might be faulty and the number of books that they rated as these have substantial use of AI, even if you take into account that that rating is not 100% accurate, I believe that the phenomenon the study is showing would still be very real. So that's why I still wanted to include the study. All right, so let's look at the graphs. So first of all, they said out of these 14,000 books, 20% of those had a substantial use of AI in them. That is averaged across the 4 years. So what I'm showing you right now is the growth across the different genres that they looked at from 2023 till 2026. And you'll see that at the beginning of their time period, 2023, 2024, the percentage of AI books was a lot lower, and it grew over the years. So with the popularity of AI and with more AI tools being available, there are also more books where AI was part of on the Amazon stores being sold. The other part that the survey revealed is that in general, there are far more books now that compete for revenue. So the number of new releases between Q1 2023 and Q1 2026 grew 28-fold, meaning compared to Q1 2023, there are 38 times more books being released in 2026. While overall revenue grew as well, it was only 8.9 times as much. The bigger problem is that while the overall revenue or the overall spend for books grew, the revenue per book went down, meaning there are way more books that are now fighting for only a slightly larger pot of revenue. So across the genres, the revenue per book declined, and that it didn't matter if the book was flagged as substantial AI use versus not. If you look closer on the chart, you see that the only genres where that is actually not true and the revenue per book went up are sci-fi and fantasy. So I wonder if there's a correlation between that and the fact that fantasy was one of the genres where we saw an increase with books written with AI much later than with the other genres, or if both of these genres are just harder for AI to write. Their finding overall is that while more books enter the market, authors earn less money per book. So the sheer volume of books shifts the share proportionally to the bottom, which means authors are earning less now that the market is being flooded by AI books. And the study goes into more detail about that as well. There is a court case that looked at that, like the liability of all of these AI books, and should authors be compensated in that way of some sort. All right, lots of information that I covered, lots of numbers that I shared from the different studies, my own survey, etc. So the overall result of this year's survey and research in general really shows that the majority still doesn't like AI in their books, and that the bias has moved more towards the no AI side. And it has shown that the bias is unfortunately manifesting itself in more aggression against authors, and that authors are expected to take on that responsibility of proving that they didn't use AI, if that's the case, while at the same time losing overall sales because there are just more books coming out every year, year over year. On the other hand, we saw that the court case that last year was still very much in progress ended this year with the settlement where Anthropic is now required to pay authors $1.5 billion. There's still more we could talk about. Like, one of the things that I didn't mention is AI companies now buying all of these used books and destroying them. Mostly I didn't cover that because I didn't want to include that video that shows how all of these books are being chopped up. I don't want to see that negativity in my life. Thanks again for everybody who joined me with the survey and helping me with the video. I appreciated all the comments and the insights. It was definitely very insightful. And now I want to know, what are your thoughts? Anything surprising in the survey results? Anything that you've seen changed since last year? Let me know down in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button, share the video with your friends if you want to. And if you like to talk about fantasy and sci-fi books, feel free to subscribe as well, because most of my videos are actually reviews and book discussions like this here. Looking forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!